you know who those stud wideouts are already, but what about when it comes to the late rounds of fantasy football drafts? You want to unearth those hidden gems, a guy who could really make an impact on your team. These are some players we feel like you have to draft. First, I have to remind you that if you join flockfantasy.com/endgame, not only do you get to join our amazing community, but also you get access to our Dynasty course where we teach you in less than an hour how to win at Dynasty and build a team that will be a champion for years to come. And you get to compete and prove it against us and our amazing community. You get a chance for prizes, free swag, and so much more. And that doesn't even include everything else that comes with your membership, like our rankings all preseason, bonus videos, articles, and more. Check it out now, flockfantasy.com/endgame, and get 30% off for a limited time. All right, let's get to those wide receivers. Somebody that is kind of going under the radar, but you feel like you want to draft as much as possible.
Yeah, I'm really coming around on Van Jefferson of the Rams. This is a guy 2 years ago, had kind of like a breakout sophomore year, over 800 yards. Last year, just didn't get going because he started the season, had knee problems in training camp, missed the start of the season, and when he finally came back, Matthew Stafford played one game and then was gone the rest of the season. And of course, we know what happened after that. The offense went into the tank. Quarterback play went into the tank. There was nothing Van Jefferson could do last year. But what I really like is if you go back to year 2 years ago when he had over 800 yards, second year in the NFL, it's kind of the leap you want to see in year 2, a guy progressing to become a starter worthy, not only in the NFL, but in fantasy. But also when you look deeper just at the player, it's easy to think like, oh, Van Jefferson, he's just a guy that runs the deep routes. And yes, the Rams do use him that way. He is their vertical threat. But he can run a lot of routes. He has a pretty good route tree, actually. This guy can do a lot of different things. I think he can be the true number 2 receiver next to Cooper Kupp. They've been looking for this kind of guy for a while, right? They tried with Allen Robinson. Obviously, that didn't work. They tried with Odell Beckham, and that did work until he tore his ACL in the Super Bowl. But I think he can be that guy in this offense. All reports are that Stafford is healthy. He's looking pretty good. Sean McVay came back. We know this is an offense that's going to throw the ball early and often. They're going to be a high-powered throwing offense. So hopefully Van Jefferson can stay healthy this offseason. I think that's a big thing. If he can enter this season 100% healthy, we can see him make what should have been a third-year leap last year. Maybe it'll be a fourth-year leap because he didn't get a third year really. So Van Jefferson to me in the late rounds, absolutely worth the gamble in this offense. A good player, has upside, has that big playability. I will take plenty of shots on Van Jefferson late.
I agree with all of that. Guy who should be the number 2 target on a pass-heavy offense, definitely worth grabbing. And that's why I decided to take him in the Scott Fish Bowl just recently. I also took this receiver who, believe it or not, I think is going to be the number 1 target on his team, passing offense, and yet he's been drafted way behind another receiver. I'm talking about Romeo Dobbs of Green Bay. Now, I know Christian Watson is the guy everyone wants for fantasy, and I get it. I want him too, okay? This is not anything against him. I absolutely think Christian Watson will be the most productive fantasy receiver in Green Bay, but that's because he's a guy who can just take the ball and go, right? Like, I don't need to explain it. You've seen the highlights. He just gets the ball in his hand. He's kind of Tyreek Hill-esque, and that's not an exaggeration because he's that fast and he's taller. But the thing is, Dobbs, I think, will be the number 1 target on this team. And so while he won't make quite as many 70-yard touchdowns, he will get probably more receptions total on the season. I think that's very possible. He's a guy who also can make a living with a deep ball. We saw that when he was in Nevada. So he does have that big playability. And while the offense is focusing on stopping the run game or just trying to slow down Watson, we saw late last season, a lot of times they'd sneak up a safety, put a spy on someone just to keep Watson in check. That will free Dobbs up. And we're hearing that it looks like right now with a new starter at quarterback, that would be Jordan Love. This is a little different, right? Jordan Love is going to find a guy he trusts and he knows, and he'll spread the ball around as much as possible, but it sounds like Dobbs is his favorite target as of right now, and I do think that means something, especially for a young quarterback who, let's face it, this is his first year, right? As a starter, this is his first go, so we're going to see him try to make the easy read if possible. If Dobbs is a guy he likes, that's who he's going to go to. So at this late ADP, where again, he's being drafted either not at all or as kind of a late round flyer, I would rather take that chance if I could. I think he's a guy who has a lot more upside than people think. Now, we got a few other guys in mind like that. Who's your next pick?
Yeah, my next pick is the number 2 wide receiver for the Saints. No, not Michael Thomas. I know everybody thinks he'll be the number 2 wide receiver for the Saints, but it's Rasheed Shaheed, who I really liked what I saw last year down the stretch as a rookie when he finally got playing time. And I like the way he fits new quarterback Derek Carr. Obviously, Chris Olave, going to run some vertical routes, going to really do everything in this offense. He's going to be the guy. Look, Michael Thomas will probably be okay for 2 or 3 games, and then he'll have some kind of injury and be out for the season, and we won't have to talk about him anymore. But Rasheed Shaheed is a deep threat, right? That was his thing last year, was the vertical routes, the deep threat, and Derek Carr is a great deep ball passer. He was one of the best deep ball passers last year, threw the 5th most deep ball attempts of any quarterback last year. I don't see that changing this year. I think Rasheed Shaheed is going to be one of those late round wide receivers you draft that can give you those tremendous upside, those big spike weeks. And look, you're not going to find many wide receivers in this range who you can just plug into your lineup every single week and feel, warm and fuzzy about, like, okay, I know he won't bust this week. No, we're in like the double-digit rounds here. Like, there's a reason why these guys are here. So if you could find a wide receiver like Shaheed who can give you those massive, 18, 20, 25-point weeks because he's catching a huge touchdown or whatever it is, that is fantastic. I think that's what Shaheed's role will be in this offense, and he's tied to the perfect quarterback for that in Derek Carr. So I'm grabbing the Saints number 2 wide receiver, Rasheed Shaheed, any chance I can.
All right, let's stay deep, talk about a player that nobody else is really on. You might have noticed late last season that for the Giants, Isaiah Hodgins became their top target. I think that continues this year. Now, this is a team that has revamped their receiver room quite a bit. And Paris Campbell, who could get a lot of action. Obviously, they brought in Darren Waller. They drafted Jalen Hyatt. You kind of think a guy like that might get squeezed out of some targets. I don't think so. The way I look at it, there's still a lot of targets up for grabs. And especially if, for some reason, Saquon Barkley decides not to show up in week 1, that would change their offense quite a bit, and they'll have to pass him more. But even besides that, look, Hodgins developed chemistry with the current starter, Daniel Jones. A rookie like Hyatt, a new acquisition like Waller and like Campbell, it's going to take some time. Hodgins is a bigger receiver. He's also somebody who showed that he can win on the outside. For a guy who was basically cut and left for nothing by Buffalo, he joined the Giants and immediately took to being a starter. Not only that, but he graded out really well. According to PFF, he was 28th overall in receiving grades among all receivers. That means he was better at his job last year than guys like Mike Evans, Christian Kirk, guys that might surprise you. Hodgins has shown that he has what it takes. He's got that connection already with Jones, and I think there will be enough targets to make him viable, especially considering you're waiting so late to get him. He's basically going to be the number 1 receiver in that offense. Hyatt, was great in college. I don't know how well his game will transition to the pros, but even so, he's really more just a stretch vertical threat. Same with Darius Slayton. You know what? Paris Campbell, prove to me you can actually stay healthy for a season, and then I'll take a shot on you. Right now, I think Hodgins is the smart move in that offense. All right, who else can we find in the later rounds of fantasy drafts that's a hidden gem?
Well, I don't know if you could find this guy because he's kind of small and he might get lost in all these other bigger wide receivers, but I kind of actually like Rondell Moore this year, which I never thought I would say, but I think things are really lining up for Rondell Moore. I keep talking about it. We're going to see Kyler Murray more this season than a lot of people think, and we might even see him the entire season. We also might see a less mobile Kyler Murray, which means more passing and less running. That's good for Rondell Moore. This is a guy who plays primarily out of the slot. The big issue for him has been staying healthy, which makes sense because he's tiny. But if he can stay healthy, he can be productive. If you look at the games last year, he played 7 games. If you don't count that game where he left like very early in the game, he basically played 7 full games last year. He had 8 or more targets in 5 of those games. And that was with Zach Ertz out there and Marquise Brown. Zach Ertz, he's going to be the number 2 target here in this offense. And this is still going to be an offense that's going to have to throw the ball a ton because the defense might be the worst defense in the entire NFL this year. And if Kyler Murray is a pocket passer, I've talked about it. That means 35, 40 plus pass attempts per game from Kyler Murray. That has plenty of value, especially for Rondell Moore as a slot receiver. Now, he may not have the big games like Van Jefferson or Shaheed because, he doesn't catch the ball down the field. But he might actually be one of those late round wide receivers that you feel warm and fuzzy about, that you know can give you solid fantasy points, especially in your PPR league. So I'm really coming around on this entire Cardinals offense, honestly. But even Rondell Moore, who I never thought I would like, I actually like in the later rounds this year.
Target volume matters, absolutely. And so a lot of that has to do with opportunity. And I think one guy who will have opportunity this year, even though, like you were just talking about with Arizona, I don't love the offensive context. And I'm not really completely sure who the quarterback will be. I think it's going to be Jimmy Garoppolo. Haven't heard anything otherwise lately. And I think Jacoby Myers will serve as a pretty good number 2 target in that offense. So I mentioned Darren Waller earlier. He's not there anymore. I mean, really, outside of Devontae Adams and Hunter Renfrow, that's it. And Renfrow hasn't really become a guy that you feel is a target hog anymore. You know, Derek Carr also gone, you know, and he would like to feed the ball to him, but he's not going to be there. Jimmy Garoppolo will be looking for a new set of receivers. Jacoby Myers, pretty impressive, the fact that he's put up decent numbers despite being in New England the last couple of years and that offense. So you imagine if he can go over 800 receiving yards the last 2 years with the Patriots and that passing offense, I think he can easily surpass that. Maybe look for a 1,000-yard season finally in Vegas. I mean, Devontae Adams, yeah, he's still going to be the guy. There's no disputing that. There will be room for another receiver, and to me, Myers is the number 2 guy there. Maybe not the most prolific passing offense. It doesn't have to be. We're not looking for a number 1 receiver here. We're talking late round guys, hidden gems, guys who are kind of being left for dead in fantasy, but could be serviceable flex plays and have room for more. Because look, if Adams does miss a game or two, something happens there, Myers all of a sudden will be very interesting because he'll get a ton of looks. He's an effective receiver, hasn't been in a great situation. It's not perfect this year, but it's better. And I definitely think he's someone who could be very productive. Now that you know which wide receivers to target late, let's figure out who you should be targeting at the beginning of fantasy drafts.